Gander, Newfoundland and Labrador. This is the Indy Broadcast.
They worked for 50 years and then ended up with nothing. Not good. And there's lots of people out there like that. They just can't make it.
On the eve of the 2025 federal election, some Newfoundlanders we spoke with this week are fed up with the Liberal government and say Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are the antidote. But with the Liberals under the leadership of Mark Carney leading in the polls, is there enough Conservative momentum to upend the surge in Liberal support on Election Day? We head to the Port-au-Port Peninsula, La C on the Baie Verte Peninsula, Springdale, Mount Pearl, and St. John's to hear from voters themselves. In Labrador, reporter Heidi Atter speaks with candidates who are newcomers to politics but hope to represent the big land in Ottawa. And a host of independent contributors chime in on key election issues. Those stories and more coming up. Welcome to the Indy Broadcast for Sunday, April 27th. I'm Justin Brake. This past week, we traveled the province to speak with residents and voters about the 2025 federal election, to hear their thoughts about issues that matter most to them and who they'll be voting for. On Tuesday, I headed to the Port-au-Port Peninsula. Okay, so I decided to drive the Port-au-Port Peninsula. I'm on the Baie St. George side right now, and one thing I noticed is coming through Stephenville and then Kippens to get here, there were very few election signs. But I do finally see an election sign in Campbell's Creek. It's Conservative. I see a man in his garage, so I pull into the driveway.
Fenton La Costa, Campbell's Creek.
I haven't seen too many election signs, but I saw one at the end of your driveway for Carol Anstey, Conservatives.
Yes.
Why did you put up her sign there?
Well, she's running for the PC, so I guess that's why.
Yeah.
You know, at least maybe a change in the area or whatever.
Yeah. So why are you going to vote Conservative this election?
Well, I seen what Trudeau done, so I'm not voting because they got the same crowd in there as what Trudeau had. Very little change. So it's going to be the same government. Now Carney's putting on a good show, but maybe he'll do something and maybe he won't. I don't know. I just don't trust him.
Is there anything the Conservatives are doing or promising that you?
Well, Buddy's
like?
supposed to come and put out his platform today.
Yeah, the costed platform.
Yeah, the cost and all that stuff. See?
Yeah,
you know. But say when he started off with the tax and with the housing and all this, Carney stole all that. As far as I'm concerned, you know, he put the same thing on. The wife's been sick now since months, and can't get nothing done. They're trying this, trying that, and everything. You know. And you take up to the hospital, you got to wait 6-8 hours because everybody's going to the emergency with a cool cold and the flu or whatever because you got no doctor to go to. The emergency rooms are full.
He's concerned about health care, but not just that. Housing, too. But not just for him. You've got your own home, obviously,
yeah,
but
yeah.
Why is housing important?
Well, not so much bad around here, like people living, you know. Yeah. But most of the young people are all gone away anyway, right? Yeah. You know. And for them trying to have own a new home now is going to be as ridiculous. They're talking, you know, just under $1 million just for average home, you know. But everybody I talk to around here, I mean, they don't want to see the Liberals in. You know, most of the people I talk to, anyway, you know. Well, only the ones that voting for a Liberal, because the lad was always for a Liberal anyway, because like Trudeau was dishing out the money, right? Every time something come up, he give more money out, you know. Not that the people didn't need it, you know. And the ones that voting for it now, they expect more money to come again, I guess. I don't know.
Do you think that there will be change with Conservatives? Because we've gone for decades, we've gone back and forth.
Yes,
Conservative, Liberal, back and forth.
Who knows? You know, you won't know that until at least if they put them in, there'll be a change. Now, the way the election is going, you know, the way the PCs, it was leading in the polls like over 20%, you know, and now it's flip-flopped.
Yeah.
And if the Liberals do get in, they'll have to thank Trump for that. Because on account of Trump, she switched around, right?
Yeah.
Not because of the Liberal Party.
After the stop in Campbell's Creek, I keep on driving. And as I do, I start seeing more and more Conservative lawn signs with the Long Range Mountains candidate's name, Carol Anstey. On April 14th, the Independent hosted a candidates' debate in the riding, but neither Anstey nor the Liberal candidate Don Bradshaw participated. Instead, we heard from the other three candidates: Independent candidate Robbie Coles, People's Party candidate Pamela Geiger, and NDP candidate Sarah Parsons, all of whom have different ideas than the Liberals and Conservatives, but none of whom have a visible presence here in Port-au-Port, at least not in terms of lawn signs. Driving through Piccadilly, I see a man working out in his backyard, so I pull into his driveway. His name is Terry, originally from Stephenville. Now he spends half the year in Piccadilly and half the year in Ontario. Like Fintan Lacosta, the man I spoke with in Campbell's Creek, Terry too is fed up with the Liberals, and he sees the Conservative Party as the viable alternative. So tell me about why you're not voting Liberal, why you're voting Conservative this election.
Well, for all the corruption. We see it every day. The corruption. Like they're feeding their buddies with money, and people are not getting nothing out of it. And there's no work. The economy is right in the toilet. So, there's a lot of issues that concern me. Like, I'm a retired veteran, but the thing is, the few bucks that I have is going out trying to stay alive. You know?
Yeah.
The cost of groceries, cost of gas. Oh my Lord! I'm hoping for change. I really am, because I got 4 young boys. I got one left in the house here. I don't know what his future is going to look like, but if we don't change, I don't say it's going to be much of a future for him.
Yeah.
You know?
So what are the Conservatives saying or promising that you think is going to
I was listening to Pierre Poilievre this morning. He's got a lot on his plate, and it sounds really good to me, what he's talking.
Yeah.
He's talking about reform and everything, and that goes right from the pensions for elderlies like me, right down to changing the immigration. All that needs to be taken care of.
Yeah. What about here specifically in rural Newfoundland? What are some of the big issues?
Here,
here?
for me, is the taxes. My Lord, sugar tax. Your tax, government tax. You got federal tax. You got provincial tax. You got sugar tax, GST, or not GST, the carbon tax, and then the sugar tax, and it's all taxed with the GST.
Yeah.
That's not right. My God.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But how do people supposed to survive with that, man? I can't believe people are surviving, to be honest with you.
As the conversation continues, Terry refers to one of the big issues for residents of the Port-au-Port Peninsula. While I counted around 50-something election lawn signs, there was another type of sign that was more common. The ones protesting what the provincial government is hoping to do here. Build a massive wind farm to feed billionaire John Risley's company World Energy GH2's proposed mega project. We don't know exactly what the wind will power, since the original plans for a hydrogen ammonia facility to ship green hydrogen overseas has been sidetracked. But it was the joint provincial-federal announcement made down the road in Stephenville in 2022 that angered a lot of people here, who have not granted a social license to have their small peninsula turned into a giant wind farm. Then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and provincial leaders showed up in Stephenville to announce an MOU between Canada and Germany for the export of green hydrogen produced from the windmills in Port-au-Port. And that angered a lot of people here.
I think it's going to ruin our peninsula. It's going to pollute it. They got to put wires in. They got to make roads. I mean, they've already started a few roads, but I don't know where they've gone from that, right? So that's down the toilet. People's not backing them, and I think that's the biggest problem, right? I'm really optimistic that Poilievre and his band of merry men will get in. I hope so, anyway, because I don't see a future with the Liberals at all. Yeah. We've had 10 years of those guys just crucifying us, so it's time to give us back our life.
By the time I finished driving the peninsula, I counted about 50 Conservative lawn signs. And Liberal lawn signs? Just one. That doesn't mean there's not Liberal support, though. It's possible the Conservative campaign was just more effective or spent more money here. The Long Range Mountains riding, which spans western Newfoundland from Burgeo, Ramia, and Port aux Basques, all the way down to St. Anthony, and has been a Liberal stronghold for a long time. In 2015, Liberal candidate Goody Hutchings won a whopping 74% of the vote. Then, in 2019, she earned 47% of the vote, and 44% in 2021. So whether the downward trend was due to Hutchings' own popularity or that of the Liberal Party, we'll soon find out just how safe a bet Long Range Mountains is for the Liberals. On Saturday, April 26th, 338canada.com was projecting 47% support for the Liberals and 44% for the Conservatives, plus or minus 9%. In the website's own words, the district is a toss-up. But based on the conversations we had with voters, the Conservatives have certainly gained momentum here. Heading east, I decide to drive the Dorset Trail Highway to the Bayvert Peninsula, which is in the central Newfoundland riding. I end up in Lassie for the night and head down to the wharf in the fishing community. It's Friday morning here in Lassie, and I'm down at the wharf. Fishermen are coming and going. There's about 8 or 10 boats tied up in the harbor here. Like many Newfoundland communities, fishing is the backbone of the local economy. Lassie Mayor Marlene Regler has agreed to sit down with me to talk about the election. She invited me to her office at the town hall. Out of the 800 residents here, what percentage of the households would you guess are involved in the fishery?
I'd say about 20%.
The riding's incumbent is Conservative MP Clifford Small, who hails from White Bay and has decades of experience in the fisheries. In 2021, he unseated Liberal incumbent Scott Sims of Bishops Falls by less than 300 votes, becoming the province's first Conservative MP since Labrador MP Peter Panashaway resigned in 2013. The 2021 win also made Small the first Conservative MP from the island since 2006. Small backed Pierre Poilievre during the 2022 Conservative leadership campaign and was later appointed by Poilievre as the shadow minister for DFO. When it comes to the fisheries, Mayor Regler says Small is their man.
Clifford came from the fishing community, probably about maybe even 100 people that lived in his community when he was growing up. And he knows what it's like. He knows what rural Newfoundland has to go through when it comes to the fishery. He grew up on the boats, and this is what rural Newfoundland is. It's mostly fishing, because every community that you visit on this peninsula, there's 18 communities on this peninsula. Every one you go into, they're built around the ocean, right? And there's boats everywhere. And he knows what those fishermen go through. You know, they go out there on that boat. It's not like they can step off and go to Tim's for a coffee. Their lives, once they go out this harbour, they're putting their lives on the line.
Regler also points to healthcare as a top issue for the people of Lassie.
In this area now, in Lassie, we got about 65 to 70% are seniors on fixed incomes. The closest hospital is Bayvert, 45 minutes away. But at most times in the past, that was either rerouted to another hospital or virtual, or you can go in and use teledeck on computer and talk to a doctor. But those seniors, they got trouble doing remote. They're not into computers. They're so used to having this one-on-one like they've been used to all their lives. And they're on fixed income. They can't afford $40, $50 a month to go see a doctor or if an emergency happened, right? Mm-hmm. Thank God for our ambulance services.
While healthcare falls under provincial jurisdiction, the federal government sends billions of dollars to the provinces for healthcare under the Federal Health Transfer Arrangement. And Canada can attach strings to that funding to make sure the provinces use it in certain ways. In March 2024, the province and feds signed an agreement that will see Canada provide upward of $256 million to support the province's 3-year action plan to improve the healthcare system here. The plan includes expanding access to family health services, which among other things means adding more family care teams, and it also includes increasing the number of healthcare workers and health services, including regulating pharmacist services so they can prescribe more medications. And finally, the plan also includes expanding mental health and substance use programs. For more of our coverage on healthcare and the federal election, go to theindependent.ca and read nurse columnist Kari Brown's piece on the threat of creeping privatization in public healthcare. It's called On Healthcare, You Don't Know What You Got Till It's Gone, and we'll link to it in our show notes. You can also check out Zoe Rowe's Case for Supervised Consumption Sites and Jerry Lynn Lewis's analysis of the federal government's paid sick leave policies. Lewis says the federal and provincial governments need to recognize sick leave as a right, not a privilege. We'll also link to those articles in this episode's show notes. I'm in Springdale now, driving through the community on the road in the highway into Springdale. There were a few Clifford Small Conservative election signs. Now that I've driven through the community, I haven't seen a single Liberal or NDP or any other election sign other than Clifford Small election signs. From the Poilievre Peninsula, I continue east and make a stop in Springdale, where I speak with a man I see in his driveway and a Clifford Small sign in his yard. Like the others I've talked to, his support is less about what the Conservatives are offering and more about voting the Liberals out.
For me, it's PC for me.
Yeah.
All the way.
Yeah.
Not Liberal.
Why is it? Why is that?
Well, Justin Trudeau did a good dent into everything. So, I mean, I think he got everybody's guts turned. But he's not there no more, but Carney's just as bad. And you know what? And I find that Pierre all the way, he needs to get in.
Yeah.
He needs to turn this, when Trump said, I'm going to make United States great again, well, we need to make Canada better and good again.
Why the Conservative Party, though? Like, is it because of Poilievre, or do you agree with their policies?
I agree with them. You know, you give everybody a chance, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think Liberal been in there long enough. It's time for somebody else to get in there and see what they can do.
And you think that you're confident that the Conservatives will bring about?
They're going to do better than what Liberal did.
Yeah. Last thing I'll ask you, you got to go. What are the big issues for you this election? What are you looking for?
PC all the way.
As I drive the riding from Green Bay to Baie Verte to Springdale, then inland to Badger, Grand Falls, Bishops Falls, and around Notre Dame Bay through Norris Arm, Glenwood, and Gander, I notice there are far more Conservative election signs. Away from the coast and the fishing communities here, in inland communities like Grand Falls and Gander, I see more signs supporting Liberal candidate Lynette Powell, but there are still as many or more Conservative signs. Powell, who grew up in Glovertown, which is now part of the Terra Nova Peninsula's riding, was a fish plant worker in her teens, which the Liberal Party webpage says, quote, gave her an understanding of primary industries and their importance to local communities, and allowed her to grow up with a deep appreciation of community, hard work, and compassion, end quote. Powell went on to get a degree in community medicine and then worked as a family physician. Now living in Grand Falls, Windsor with her family, she's big on healthcare, one of the province's most pressing issues. But is that enough to unseat Clifford Small? Like Long Range Mountains, this too is a toss-up. As of April 26th, 338canada.com was reporting 48% support for the Conservatives and 47% for the Liberals, with a 9% margin. It doesn't get any closer than that. To Labrador, where Indy reporter Heidi Atter has spoken with candidates and voters alike. Earlier this month, The Independent tried to organize a candidates debate in Happy Valley Goose Bay, where Liberal candidate Philip Earle and Conservative candidate Ella Wallace live. After Wallace said the date didn't work for her, we suggested alternate dates but never heard back. Also, NDP candidate Marius Normore lives in southern Labrador and wasn't able to attend in person. So, Heidi Atter decided to interview them each, one at a time. Ella Wallace didn't respond to that request either, but Heidi spoke with Philip Earle, though, who hails from the Labrador Straits and has served as vice president of Air Borealis, an Indigenous-owned airline. And she also spoke with Marius Normore, who grew up in L'Anse aux Loups and has recently become a father. Here's a bit of Heidi's interview with Liberal candidate Philip Earle.
We know that Labrador is in a housing crisis. We have high rates of homelessness, both overt and hidden, and overcrowding in Indigenous homes specifically is leading to a number of health issues, physically and mentally. What would you do specifically to help the housing crisis throughout Labrador?
There's no question that as I've made my way throughout the riding, people have talked to me about the housing shortage and some of the challenges specifically to communities within the riding directly related to the shortage of housing. I would be a strong advocate for building more homes, studying the problem, the issue, the matter at hand, more specifically, to try and bring the positive results that everyone is asking for. I believe to get to that result is going to take collaboration between all levels of government, starting with the federal government, the provincial government, and the Indigenous governments in Labrador, specifically the Nunavut government and the Innu Nation. I believe that the platform of the federal Liberals is that we want to have specific programs for northern communities to build more homes, and then for individual home building to be able to remove the GST from bills that are less than $1 million, and to have a program that's robust, acknowledging that there is a need and trying to fill in where gaps exist.
Advocates say that Labrador is in the midst of an addictions and a trauma crisis. When you look at the ongoing traumas from colonialism that are being compounded by the deadly drugs that are circulating, and that has led to, in one Labrador community, there has been 28 deaths in 3 years. And there have been multiple overdoses so far throughout Labrador in 2025. Advocates say that this is a massive issue and it needs the federal government to step up. What specific policies or programs do you propose to begin to address the addictions crisis in Labrador?
I believe, again, to get to a solution to this, it's going to require collaboration between the Indigenous governments concerned and the federal government and the provincial government. You've seen policies come out from the federal government, from our party, to become tougher on crime, specifically around drug crime. And I believe that will have a positive impact in curbing the amount of drugs that are going into the communities. But I believe the problem is deeper than that. I believe that some of the challenges with the drugs is that people are suffering from the intergenerational trauma that you talked about. There are challenges around mental health. And again, to get to the solution is not as simple as saying we're going to stop the flow of drugs into the community, but it's a holistic approach to health to alleviate the serious problem that we have.
And here's an excerpt, too, from Heidi's interview with NDP candidate Marius Normore.
If elected, what would you do specifically to help the housing crisis throughout Labrador?
When it comes to housing, that's one of the most urgent issues I'm hearing about from people all across Labrador. It's not specific to one particular region. It seems to be north, south, east, and west. We're seeing a lack of affordable options, as you mentioned, overcrowding, and in many cases, especially in Indigenous communities, people living in homes that need major repair. Myself, I think that's unacceptable. The NDP, same stance, it's very unacceptable. We have a plan to build affordable homes across Canada, and that includes a strong commitment to rural and northern housing. We want to get serious about building social housing as well as co-op housing and providing direct supports for repairs and upgrades in communities that need it the most. Another thing as well, one of the pillars of the NDP, we want to take on corporate landlords and housing speculators that are driving up costs. Everyone deserves a safe and affordable place to live. And I've seen the challenges firsthand in our region. I will work hard to ensure that those things I just mentioned are implemented. I know another one as well, for myself personally. I'm fairly young in the political realm. I'm seeing firsthand people of my generation struggling to be able to afford a house or a safe place to call home, and rising interest rates, all that, it's making housing unattainable. And I feel like the NDP is the one party that is committed to actually tackling this and making sure that houses are being built and are built for families and individuals.
What specific policies or programs do you propose to begin to address the addictions crisis in Labrador?
We're seeing the effects of the addiction crisis in real time all across Labrador. I know it might be easy just to say enforcement, make sure that we're going after drug dealers and traffickers and all that, but it's much bigger than that. We have to make sure that we're putting investments into people who are addicted and want to break that cycle of addiction. So we need to invest in rehabilitation centers, because all across Labrador, that treatment is not readily available to whoever may want to actually access it. Another big one is working with the communities to see what their actual needs are and try to work out a plan based on the individual community, and then moving forward based on the feedback from the local community. I don't believe when it comes to handling the addiction crisis that it's a one size fits all. So what may work in, say, Southern Labrador may not necessarily work in a rural community in Northern Labrador. So having the input from the community, listening to the leaders, and having a path forward, that's one of the things I'd want to do as an MP, is essentially be that person there to listen and advocate to find solutions based on what I'm hearing.
Well, Conservative candidate Ella Wallace didn't respond to our request for the debate and then for the interview. She did send a statement when Heidi Atter invited her to comment on a story The Independent published about local calls to re-establish a search and rescue station in Labrador. Atter first spoke with Jeanette Russell, the mother of young fish harvester Mark Russell, who tragically died at sea alongside his crewmate Joey Jenkins in 2021. Russell said, quote, "Ottawa needs to see the faces of the people directly impacted by the lack of primary search and rescue in Labrador, and be reminded that Labrador lives and the safety of our families matter, and be reminded that they have a duty of care." Liberal candidate Philip Earle said in a statement that establishing a primary search and rescue site in Labrador will be one of his top and most urgent priorities if elected. He said he'll never forget what happened to 14-year-old Burton Winters in 2012, when a rescue helicopter took 2 days to arrive. Earle said, quote, "That delay was unacceptable, and even one preventable loss is one too many. Labradorians deserve reliable, timely access to search and rescue services." He said in his statement, "Our communities rely heavily on the land and sea, and it's essential that we have the support we need when emergencies happen." NDP candidate Marius Normore said that, if elected, he would work toward establishing a primary marine search and rescue center in the region. For far too long, Labrador has been underserved when it comes to critical emergency services, he said in a statement. "Every minute counts in an emergency. Delays due to distance from current SAR bases have already proven fatal in some tragic cases, and that's unacceptable." Wallace said in her own statement that she recognizes how vital marine search and rescue is to the people of Labrador, and while she can't make a specific commitment ahead of consultations and budget assessments, she supports efforts to strengthen safety and emergency response in the region. Wallace said if elected, she'd be eager to work with local leaders, Indigenous communities, and federal partners to explore the best ways to improve marine safety, including the possibility of a primary SAR site in Labrador. To read the full story, go to theindependent.ca, and we'll also link to the story in our show notes. Staying in Labrador, the candidates weren't the only ones Heidi spoke with. In another story, she speaks with 3 Labrador youth about their priorities for the election.
What do you see as being the important issues for the federal government that you really hope that there's time, there's dedication, there's work put into the important issues for the future?
I think a big thing now on the federal level is, especially like I said, seeing what's happening in the States, is I have a lot of friends who are trans specifically who are very worried for their, just being allowed their right to exist, basically. So I think even just holding the time and the space to acknowledge them and to make sure that they actually have their rights and they're not taken the way they're currently being restricted in the States is, I think, very important.
Read Heidi Atter's story at theindependent.ca or look for the link in our show notes. Back to the island, where reporter Yumna Iftikhar toured Cape Spear and the Avalon ridings earlier this week to speak with voters there.
I don't know if it makes too much difference who you vote for anymore. It doesn't seem that any of them are doing much good for us nowadays.
In the Cape Spear riding, which used to be St. John's South Mount Pearl, Yumna met Jan Mercer, a senior.
What's the one thing that you want, whoever comes into power, you want them to do for you, for Newfoundland, and for Canada in general?
Considering my age, I think that they need more medical and programs for older people. The population of Newfoundland seems to be getting older all the time. The younger ones are moving away, and I think they need more opportunities for the older people that are living here now.
Like many others we've heard from, Mercer is leaning toward voting Conservative. But what are the Conservatives and the other parties offering when it comes to seniors? As Yumna writes in her article, the Conservative Party is promising to raise the amount that working seniors earn without being taxed to $34,000, which is a $10,000 increase. They also say they'll allow seniors to keep their RRSPs growing for an additional 2 years. The Liberals? They say they'll raise the guaranteed income supplement by 5% for 1 year and delivering up to $652 in additional tax-free support to low-income seniors. And they'll also allow seniors to keep more of their retirement savings by reducing the amount they're required to withdraw from their registered retirement income fund by 25% for 1 year. The NDP says it would increase the guaranteed income supplement for seniors, double the Canada Disability Benefit, reverse the recent capital gains tax, and permanently remove the GST from everyday essentials like grocery store meals, cell phone bills, internet, and heating costs. And the Green Party has promised a guaranteed livable income and to expand paid leave for those taking care of the elderly. Yumna also spoke with a resident of the riding who had a Tom Osborne Liberal sign in his yard. Scott Bruce is voting Liberal and doesn't like what Pierre Poilievre has brought to the table.
The biggest thing lately from the Conservatives has been the how freely Mr. Poilievre would like to start using the notwithstanding clause. That's a huge one for me. The fact that during the whole the COVID protests and all that stuff, he happily aligned himself with a bunch of folks who wanted to, in some ways, overthrow the government with the whole memorandum of understanding and this kind of council they wanted to form with the government and hold them to that. It was all very strange, and that was the folks he aligned himself with. So he's already kind of supporting folks that would basically overthrow a democratic government. The long list of Trumpisms he's kind of brought into things, those kind of populist tactics.
Bruce said it's unfortunate he and others in the riding didn't get a chance to hear much from the other 3 candidates in Cape Spear. An oceans data specialist, he would have liked to hear more about their plans to address the climate crisis, a major issue that's had very little coverage in mainstream press this election period.
I haven't even heard of who my NDP candidate is here locally, so I don't even know who I would be dealing with. But from a presence side of things, even just awareness of what my options are locally, I know I've got 2. And one of them is aligned in a direction that I absolutely have no time for currently.
Bruce also said it's unfortunate to be in a situation where so many feel they have to vote strategically in order to keep a leader like Pierre Poilievre from becoming Prime Minister. In 2015, Justin Trudeau promised to replace Canada's flawed first-past-the-post electoral system if he was elected. Instead, experts have long said, Canada should adopt some form of proportional representation, which would give voters better representation in Parliament. But Trudeau ditched the plans altogether in 2017, breaking one of his biggest election promises. If you're voting Liberal or Conservative instead of NDP, Green, or any other party, mainly to try to keep the red or blue out, you're not alone. Celebrated Newfoundland author Lisa Moore was torn over whether to vote Liberal or to vote for who she really wanted to, the NDP candidate in her riding. In an article for The Independent, Moore likens strategic voting to what she calls anticipatory compliance. What is anticipatory compliance? Well, in Moore's words, it's, quote, accepting defeat in advance of a fight and acting under social and cultural pressures that cause people to carry out the work of making themselves complicit to the ruling power. We imagine what those in power want, and it comes to seem commonsensical to carry out those imagined demands. even if the power in question never utters them. Moore goes on to write that in 2025, voting with anticipatory compliance, strategically voting for one party instead of who we really want to vote for, is nudging democracy toward the edge of a cliff when our cherished system of government and social organization may already be teetering. At a time when we must staunchly defend democracy, is this the time to be steadfast and uncompromising about what we believe is right? Over the last few weeks, The Independent has published many articles and analysis pieces highlighting key election issues like housing, healthcare, gender equality, food insecurity in northern Labrador, Palestine solidarity, and more. Read them at theindependent.ca. Our election coverage is supported by the Covering Canada Election 2025 Fund. Before we go, the Indy is hosting an election night watch party in St. John's Monday evening. Admission is free and it would be great to see you there. It's at Spirit Music Bar, which is at 164 Water Street in St. John's, starting at 8 p.m. local time. The Indy Broadcast is a proud member of the Harbinger Media Network. The show is hosted and produced by me, Justin Brake, and our original theme music is by Adam Foran. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.